presenter, Ben Morgan, is the principal and managing director of the Center for Crisis and Risk Communications. He's also associate faculty at Royal Roads University, where he teaches crisis and risk communications. And he has held communication leadership roles during some of Canada's recent disasters: 2013 Calgary flood, 2016 Fort McMurray wildfire, 2020 Nunavut BC wildfire, and the 2021 BC atmospheric river flooding event. Was that a new term for most of you? Atmospheric river? I hadn't heard one. I'm not in disaster communications. This guy is, and he's going to talk to us about the social effects of having proper or improper communications during disasters. And I think we all agree that knowing what's going on is crucial for those impacted and those who are concerned about what's going on in the other part of our country. So, Ben?
Thanks very much for the invitation to come have a conversation with you and the folks online. Appreciate the invitation very much. It's I have a habit of surrounding myself with smart people, so thanks for surrounding me, you folks. Looking at the smart people in the room, thank you. So my name is Ben Morgan. I run a shop called the Center for Crisis and Risk Communications. I also teach crisis and risk communications at Royal Roads University in the Master of Arts Disaster and Emergency Management. Contracts instructor at Mount Royal University, contracts instructor at Western University. And this all kind of took a little bit of a spin for me after a 16-year career as a paramedic, mostly in the city of Calgary. And went back to school, did my communications master's, and somehow fell into the world of crisis and risk communications. I've had the fortune or the misfortune of leading local authority communications during the Calgary floods in 2013, Fort McMurray in 2016, Lillooet, BC with wildfire, City of Merritt with the recovery communications from the atmospheric river flooding event. Also in Calgary, bottom corner, it was 2014 snow timber event. It's a pretty significant event in Calgary, and a vault fire. And that just underpins all of the work with general crises and issues management work that I get involved in. We do crisis communication plans, training, coaching, event support, etc. But we're here to talk about crisis and risk communication, or the terminology I tend to use is high stress, high concern situations and environments. So when people are feeling stressed or concerned, the way the brain processes information, the way the brain processes communications effectively changes. Like I said, I surround myself with smart people. The smartest person that I surround myself with is a man named Dr. Vincent Cavello. He's a dear friend, a mentor, and advisor. If you've ever studied crisis and risk communications or looked into it, you've probably found Dr. Cavello. He's a brilliant man. Any of the statements that I make today are not mine, they're his, as it relates to theory and principles, and I do so with his full permission. So Dr. Cavello is New York. He's based out of New York, and he's basically, Horizon North Explosion of the Gulf Course and the Gulf Coast, he's there. If it's Ebola in Africa, he's there. If it's 3 Mile Island nuclear facility leaking radiation, he's there. If it's terror attacks in New York, he's there. So he's just been there, done that. But what makes him pretty unique is most of his master's work was in neuroscience, and then his PhD work was in communications. The man would put brain probes on people's heads, stick them in MRI machines, test messages, sequences, feelings, emotions, and watch which parts of the brain activates and when they shut down. So all of his research is done which supports effective crisis and risk communications. So today in my 20-minute run, I'm going to try to talk about some core principles of crisis and risk communications, or high stress, high concern communications, some theories. If we have enough time, I'll do a little bit of story time. We all have stories. And then if we have time, I'll throw a couple different tools that support effective risk and crisis communications for you. So core principles of high stress, high concern. So when people are feeling stressed, when people are feeling concerned, the way in which the brain processes information changes. I don't have a paper copy of my notes, so if I keep doing this, this is fine. We know through the work, or I know through the work of Dr. Cabello, that effective high stress, high concern communications is a science-based discipline. It really is, there really is science behind it. And Dr. Cabello will tell you that when people are feeling high stress, high concern situations, the rules of communications change. If we want to be as effective as we can be. We know that if we want to be as successful as we can be in our communications, that there are 3 keys to successful crisis and risk communications. One is to anticipate, one is to prepare, and then of course to practice. So anticipation looks very different. Hazard identification and risk assessments, looking at historical events, etc. Preparation. I think some of our presenters, the climate resiliency talked a lot about preparing for reducing those risks. And then practicing, practice. One of the best examples of effective anticipation, preparation, and practice. I know some of you are looking at the picture of Rudolph Giuliani thinking, really, you're using him as an example? I am, because it's a really great example in the days before we might know him today. But Rudolph Giuliani won or was presented by Time Magazine as Person of the Year. This came after a press conference that was held in 2001 from the grounds of New York terror attacks when 2 jets hit 2 towers. And during the press conference, Rudolph Giuliani was asked, how many casualties are there? And his answer was, the number of casualties will be more than any of us can bear ultimately. That answer to that question was written 6 years before any jets hit any towers. FBI came to the city of New York and said, we have a high degree of certainty there's going to be a significant terror attack in our city. We don't know when, we don't know where, we don't know what, but it's going to be big. So the city of New York, that's their anticipation. They started to prepare. All of the emergency management groups, police, authorities put in mitigations. How are we going to assess the threat level, etc. And also within the preparation was preparing for communications. So Dr. Cabello worked with Rudolph Giuliani, and they knew that they would be asked, how many casualties are there? This was the answer that was written for that question 6 years before, and Rudolph Giuliani practiced answering 77 questions, because there is a 77 most commonly asked questions by journalists during a disaster. That was the answer. It didn't matter if it was jets into towers or a bomb in a building or something in the subway or a crop duster with cyanide gas over Central Park. They knew they were going to be asked at some point in time this question, and this was the answer that was prepared. And he practiced it for 6 years. So that's really one of the great examples of anticipation, preparation, and practice. We also know typically when people are concerned or upset, they will often have difficulty remembering, understanding, and processing information. Think about the last time you had a really good argument with your significant other. You walked away from that, and did you remember everything that you heard? Probably not, right? When people are feeling stressed and concerned, they will often have difficulty remembering, understanding, processing information. And they will typically want to know that you care before they care what you know. That goes back to Aristotle, and Theodore Roosevelt had said it. It still holds true today. That also holds true, by the way, for employees and staff and citizens. They want to know that their municipality cares about them. They want to know that the government cares about them. They want to know that they matter as an employee. People want to know that you care before they care what you know. During the Calgary floods, if you followed that, you would have seen that we put Naheed Nenshi, the mayor of Calgary at the time, first thing in the morning as the press briefing. And his message was, I was in the community and I saw that people are hurting. I want you to know that we're here for you. We then followed that with the director of emergency management talking about infrastructure recovery and all those sorts of things. If you follow the Fort McMurray communications, you might have seen Chief Darby Allen, 30-second Twitter clips. I'm here. We're still fighting. We're working for your community. We care about you. We're working to bring you home. Leading with empathy and care and demonstrating to people that they matter will really bring you a long way in your communications. When people are concerned or upset, they will most often focus on what they hear first. There's a principle called primacy recency. People will focus and hear most often what they heard first and what they hear last. So when we start our communications, we want to try to lead with empathy, and I'll get into that in a moment. Show of hands. Arguably, No one here in the room is feeling highly stressed or highly concerned right now? Supposing so. I'm feeling a little stressed because I see the snowflakes outside and thinking about we bought the little car, not the truck. But in this type of environment, the average human brain can remember, process, and recall how many pieces of information would you guess? Just throw it out. Three in a low stress, low concern. Oh, is that 4? Okay, nice. 3, 4. It's actually 7. In low stress, low concern situations, the average human brain can remember, recall, and process about 7 pieces of information. If you think back to when they developed the phone numbers, before we had to worry about area codes, your phone number was 7 digits. It's the science that drove that. Now that we have to worry about area codes, I don't remember anybody's number. The other thing that we have challenging us right now is these devices. Our brains don't have to work as hard. And in fact, research today is suggesting that that number 7 is dropping to about 5, just because there's so much information. We're so delivered with information that's hard for our brains to process. So that said, in high stress, high concern, how many pieces of information can the average human brain bring? 2, 1. Yeah, that's my brain. That's why I always say the average. It's about 3. Which again, if you think about it, if your house is on fire and you need help, or if you're having a mental health crisis, you just have to call 211. If you're feeling unwell and you need help, you're calling 811. If you're in Europe or other parts of the world, it's 999. The magic number 3. And so the importance of bringing up the number 3 is because when we're delivering communications to people who are feeling high stress, high concern because the river is flooding, because the wildfires are coming into my community, because the tsunami has disrupted our whole community. We want to serve up our communications in bits of 3. Was anybody here feeling stress or concern during the COVID pandemic? Okay. You might have seen, or if I tell you now, you'll go, you heard 3 messages all throughout the COVID pandemic. 3. We want to help keep you safe from this virus. We're asking you to do 3 things. Wash your hands with soap and water, stay home if you're feeling sick, and cover your mouth if you cough and sneeze. 3 messages you heard consistently throughout the pandemic. When it came to vaccinations, book an appointment, show up for your appointments, follow up your appointment. 3 messages. Effective communications in high stress, high concern will be served up in 3 messages. There's a whole heart. That's the tool section. We get to that. But remember 3. Although we all have lots of things to say, Dr. Cabello will use the analogy of just spoon feed. There's this whole plate of food we want to give to people. Just give it to them in small doses. We'll get all there, but just give it up in 3s. We also know that effective communication typically begins with empathy. If we lead with empathy, we have an 80% chance of landing, 80% chance more of landing with our audience, of connecting with the people we're talking to, which leads into what's called trust determination theory, which we'll get to in the theory section. I think it's really important just to say here, try to avoid using absolutes and making promises. So words like ensure or guarantee, or if I was Prime Minister Trudeau and I held a press conference and I said, we're doing everything possible. Well, then I'll say, really? 2 million? What about 10? You're working 18 hours a day? What about 24? If you're doing everything. So avoid using words like ensure, absolute, and making absolute statements. Beginning of the pandemic, we all heard masks are not effective. Masks will not protect you from COVID. 3 months later, mandatory. You have to wear a mask. That helps, it helps bring down the trust that you have with your community. So no wonder when we got to vaccinations and the government is saying, you need to get vaccinated, some people are saying, that's not resonating with me, I don't trust you. Right? So avoid using absolutes. If we just had to reframe this by saying, currently research suggests that mask use is not effective in protecting people against COVID. 3 months later, I could come back and say, because we care about you, we've done so much more research, and now we believe, or research now suggests that wearing masks is really effective in helping prevent the spread of COVID. So avoid using words that are absolute in nature. Okay, 6 minutes. Here we go. Some of the theories, there's 4 that I go to when I consider communications in high stress, high concern situations and environments. The first one is mental noise theory, and mental noise theory basically says when we're feeling stressed and concerned, there's just so much stuff out there that it's really hard for me to process. I really can't filter, understand, process everything, and it limits my ability to process and understand information because there's just so much noise out there. The other theory that I look to is trust determination theory. So trust determination theory, trust is a big thing, especially when we're talking disasters and we're talking governments and agencies that are trying to communicate with the public. Trust determination basically says, if you're telling me a message, it's going to land with me better if I trust you. If I don't trust you, it's not going to land with me. And what do I do with that? I go to Facebook, because that's where the people I trust and I know are sharing information. I'll go to where I trust people. If we want to earn that trust with people, there's a few trust determination factors. That includes empathy, care, compassion, competence, speciality. I'm just going to say I'm a PhD in climate resilience, but I'm not. But when Sarah stood here, she's demonstrating competence. She's demonstrating that she has expertise in that. And so I'm believing maybe and trusting what she's saying. Uniforms also have an element of trust with certain demographics. We actually see a little bit of a difference though. If we've got people from other countries where a uniform is negatively associated, and then we're here in Canada and talking to that uniform, I don't trust you. So it's trust plays a huge role in whether or not I'm going to accept what you're saying to me. The other theory is risk perception or outrage theory, which basically says if something is happening to me and I have no control over it, no influence over it, I'm going to feel outrage. And I have to put that outrage, or I want to put that outrage somewhere. I was sitting with members of council in a small municipality. It was the first in-person council meeting that they had since the pandemic. And there was a group of folks who had very strong beliefs, and they were there to yell at council for, the protests and the stuff that was happening all throughout. You can't take away our rights. You can't take away our freedoms. You can't. And they were just there because they needed to express their voice. They needed to express their anger. They needed to express their outrage based on their beliefs. So when something is out of my control, my flight is late, I'm feeling outraged. What do? I go to Twitter. I talk about the airline. I say, I'm so pissed off at you. Or Starbucks doesn't miss my coffee, right? I'm going to make a post about it, right? So it's outrage is I have to do something with it because it's not within something that I can control. The other theory that I lean on heavily is negative dominance theory. That basically, and again, I'm just going to reframe this, high stress, high concern situations, environments. When I'm feeling stressed or concerned, I will likely intuitively assign more weight to messages and information that are negative. So if something is negative in impact or negative tone, I will assign more weight to it intuitively. It'll feel harder, it'll feel stronger than all of the positive messages. Have you ever heard the expression shit sandwich? You're doing a performance review for your employee and you've got some bad news and you try to sandwich it with some good things to say about them, right? That's negative dominance theory, essentially. And so Dr. Cavello will say we need about 3 positives for every 1 negative to try to balance out how our brains process those informations. WestJet before, the old WestJet, they did really good at this. So what they would do is they would make positive deposits into the sentiment bank, right? They would see those videos where they jump out of Coke machines at Christmas and give everybody presents. That's not because they're sitting around the boardroom table saying, hey, we have an extra $300,000. What should we do with it? They're saying, how do we create that spirit with our community, our stakeholders? How do we continue to make positive deposits so that when something goes wrong, you've got some positive sentiment to draw off of. So when something goes sideways, we say, oh, but it's Western. Right? There's no hope for Western Valley. Okay, that's 1 minute left. Take 10 minutes more if you want. Thank you.
So subtle.
It's very subtle and very technically advanced. I love it.
I was
Okay.
trying to not interrupt.
Would you like 10 minutes of story time? Okay, so story time with Ben. Especially in natural disasters, I always encourage folks to think outside of the box. So rather than following your plan and saying this is check, think outside of the box. Find new ways of doing things. Be responsive to your communities. Understand what their needs are. I mean, there's a whole plethora of tools and all that kind of stuff. But I'll share this. So this is Calgary 2013 floods, and for framing perspective, it was the 1 in 100 flood event. We evacuated about 80,000 people out of 26 different communities. Major loss of infrastructure. The zoo evacuation. I think you all heard about the hippo that was at risk for going out and killing people. And just for fun, they thought they would throw a fully loaded diesel train on a bridge over the river that was failing. Like it was just a shit show, really. But our communications team, we were doing really, really good. We had 1.1 million visits to our website the first day of the floods. We, I think, increased our social media following on Twitter by about 1 billion%. Any of our social posts that we did had incredible engagement. We were down in the AOC patting ourselves on the back, and I would say to my team, "Great job! Look at that tweet got a million engagement. That was awesome." But 4 or 5 days in, I went down downtown Calgary, just outside of downtown, one of the most affluent areas of Calgary. And I was walking through the neighborhood, and I took this picture. This is in one of the most affluent parts of Calgary in 2013. And this is how our community was speaking to us. They were finding pieces of cardboard, ripping it out, writing on it with a Sharpie and taping it to the front of their house. You can't see it, but it says electricity needed, pump needed, gas needed. That's how they were communicating to us. And I remember being down there and I just stopped and I said, man, it's insane. If I think that 1.1 million visits to our website, and if I think that our Twitter engagement is awesome, then we're failing the people that matter most. We're failing them because they're not on their computer. They're not watching the news. They're not filling out an online form to tell me that they need gas. They're ripping up pieces of cardboard. So it was that moment we pivoted and we started doing basically lemonade stands in the communities with sandwich boards saying information here. Another thing I noticed was we had a staging area for waste dump trucks, and the dump trucks would come into the community, stop, park there. People would come out and throw all the garbage out of their basements and their homes into the garbage truck. And they were all coming up to the garbage truck operators asking questions, and they just stood there and said, "I don't know. On McMahon's sakes, they're our frontline ambassadors. They're ambassadors. They should be a messenger of communication. We were missing that as a communication channel. Right? So think about your staff, your employees, your teams, educating them, providing the same information you're trying to provide to your community, because they're in the community, they're a part of it. So empower them when you can. The funnest story out of the Calgary floods, I was doing a debrief after the event, looking at all of our communication efforts, and I came across one tweet, and that tweet said, "Where do you go to find the best evacuation maps for Calgary?" And they called out the city. They said no, and they said Global TV, no, and they listed a couple others, and then they said at Car2Go, yes, follow them for evacuation maps. So I looked up Car2Go. Car2Go was a car share company. Are familiar with Car2Go? They vanished a few years ago, but basically they were a car share company where you could pick up a car and drive it, drop it off. Just a great little program. So I looked at their evacuation maps and I thought, man, these are actually pretty good. So I called up Car2Go. I said, "Can I buy you a coffee?" And we went for coffee. And I said, "Where are you getting your information on evacuations?" So I was going to the city of Calgary. We're taking that information, putting it into our system, and then sending it to our members. And I said, "That's really interesting." And then the guy said, "Yeah, you know what else is interesting?" I said, "What?" He says, "We put a geofence in our program so that any of our car share users could not drive the car into any of these evacuated areas." In fact, we have a mobile app and we can push mobile alerts. And we have an email distribution list of about 35,000 people. I said, wait a second, you've got like a mobile app you can push alerts to. You've got an email list of 35,000 people. And those are mostly people that are downtown, either working or living. I said, yeah. So on my crisis communication plan for the city of Calgary, I had Car2Go as a communication channel, entered into agreement with Car2Go, and I said, can I send you stuff for you to send out to your membership? And he said, we'd be happy to. Think outside of the box, right? Think outside of the box. How can you be creative and reach people in ways that you wouldn't be normally able to reach them? I'm really super proud of this one. This comes out of Merritt, BC. So Merritt, BC was heavily impacted by the atmospheric river flooding event, 2021 December. Merritt, BC, population of about 10,000. They evacuated the entire city. Before the evacuation of Merritt, they had about a 1% rate availability for rental properties in home buying. Like it's really, really hard to get a home or rent a place. You can imagine what the rate was after the flood because they lost a whole bunch of homes. But what happened in Merritt is they evacuated the entire city. Basically, they said, get out. So some people went to Canada, some people went to Kelowna, some people went to other municipalities, other people went stayed with friends and family. Very few of them actually registered with the Red Cross, which is one of the main organizations that will be tapped for disaster support. Very few of those people registered with the Red Cross because they were just going to stay with friends and family. So from a recovery perspective, we had no idea where people were or how to reach them. So I went to the local radio station, Q101, and I said, hey, do you guys have do you guys have the contest line? You know, like text Garth, and we'll put you in a draw for Garth Brooks tickets. Right? The guy said, yeah, actually, we just put that in place 3 months ago. I said, okay, cool. So we took the director of recovery operations, we took him to the radio station, we did a radio bid, and we asked people, if you've been displaced from Merritt, if you're still outside of Merritt, text Merritt to our contest line. Text the word Merritt. And then we shared that ad with their sister stations, Kamloops, Kelowna, and a couple of the other stations. And what we did with that is people would hear that on the radio, say, yeah, I'm still in Kelowna. I don't know what's happening in Merritt. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. So they would text Merritt into the radio station. As soon as they texted in, they got an auto reply back that said, the city of Merritt cares about you and wants to help you get the resources you need. Please call this number, which was the number to the caseworkers that were in place. And then also gave us a whole Excel spreadsheet that we could export with all of the people's phone numbers that have been displaced from Merritt. So think outside of the box. Think about creative ways of reaching people. Think of creative ways of connecting with people that matters most. Okay, tools of high stress and concern. I'll just do this real quick. These are some of my fundamental tools. They come from Dr. Cavello. One is called the message map. Message map is a very simple, easy, powerful tool. It's on my website, centerforcrisiscommunications.com, and it's under the resource list. There's a video there of Dr. Cavello talking about message mapping. But basically, a message map is a hierarchical way of building information. So a message map then would be built into speaking notes, be built into a media release, and built into social media posts. Would also support a spokesperson in answering tough questions. So a message map is a great way of organizing information. I knew I only had 20 minutes, so I didn't give you an example. But a message map for COVID, as an example, wash your hands, wrists, warm soap and water, stay home if you're feeling sick, cover your mouth if you cough or sneeze. That would go across the top line. And then for every key message that's developed or created, we want to provide supporting facts or proof points, because otherwise it's just an empty statement, right? So wash your hands with soap and water. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about washing your hands with soap and water. Make sure you use warm soap and water. Use hand sanitizer if you don't have them available to you, and you should be washing your hands as much time as it takes you to sing happy birthday twice. So you provide supporting points. One of my key messages during the floods and the fires would be public safety is our top priority. Public safety remains our top priority. Well, that's easy to say, but I have to prove it. I have to put some substance behind it. So during the Calgary floods, public safety is our top priority. We take it so seriously. We have 120 police officers that have come from Edmonton to help keep our community safe. We have Canada Task Force 1 here from Vancouver to help us respond to this emergency. And yes, in fact, your safety is so important to us. We have the Canadian Armed Forces here helping protect our critical infrastructure. So when you can support proof point, it just makes it more believable and connect with your audience. This little number here, this is called the periodic table for high concern communications developed by Dr. Cabello. You'll see, if you can see, everyone is a 3. So KDG, CCO, KDD, VCD. Why are there 3? And it ties right back to this message mapping thing. So message map, if I'm going to do 3 key messages, I'm going to use one of these templates. My favorite is CCO, compassion, conviction, optimism. So if I'm building 3 messages, why 3 messages? Because when we're feeling stress or concern, the average human brain can remember, recall, process the 3 pieces of information. I'm going to try to do 1 message that is compassionate, 1 is conviction, and 1 that is optimistic. So we understand this is very difficult for our community. We're committed to finding resolution to what's happened. And we're hopeful that we'll be through this together soon. So that might be my 3 messages, right? 1 of compassion, 1 of conviction, and 1 of optimism. COVID, as an example, you saw a lot of the KDG. I'm going to tell you what you need to know, what you need to do, and where you need to go. Evacuations, KDG, what you need to know, what you need to do, where you need to go. So I take this periodic table, what's happening, pick out the right template, plug it into that message map, build out 3 messages, and then provide the proof points. That becomes my foundation for communicating with communities in high stress, high concern situations. 2793, that's my other favorite formula. It stands for, see, I had to redo the deck because I only had 2793. I know that I have 27 words, 9 seconds to give you 3 messages. I'll go back to the COVID. I want to help keep you safe from COVID. I'm asking you to do 3 things. Ready? This is going to be 27 words in 9 seconds. Wash your hands with soap and water. Stay home if you're feeling sick. Cover your mouth if you cough or sneeze. That's 9 seconds. Why 9 seconds? Because that's what is the average sound bite in a media story. Why 27 words? Because Dr. Cabello will tell you at 28 words, your brain starts to drift somewhere else. We actually have about the attention span of a goldfish, which is around 8 seconds. And then you'll come back to it. So 27, 9, because it's a sound bite, 3 messages. Why 3? Because that's what makes high stress, high concern communications. CCO, I talked about that already. That's my time. Thank you very much.
Oh, you put a lot into 27 minutes. That was great. That's at least 3 messages.
Right.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for our presenter? Oh.
Thank you. That was loud. I found it absolutely very interesting. Thank you very much. I'm interested in how the research supports how closely we held convictions we had before the crisis. And my example would be if I believe something before, like masks don't work, and then when I get stressed and I'm doubling down on what I already believe and I'm holding those tighter because I'm scared and confused. Is there fact behind that? Am I seeing a recency bias in that?
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm not a researcher. I use the research of others. So can I answer, is there research? There likely is. What I'll tell you is that we have about 27 different biases in which we process information. So there's 27 filters on average. And then Dr. Cabello will say, there's about 27 filters, and then there's sub filters in those filters, depending on where you're at. There's also another researcher, Dr. Timothy Coombs, Texas A&M University, who talks about situational crisis communication theory. So situational crisis communication theory, it's more leans towards organizations and organizational behavior, but you will bring your own perspectives, your own experiences forward into that next event. So we were talking earlier at our table about you can take an event, so one event, And everybody in this room would experience that event differently. Right, so I got in trouble by Dina Hinshaw. I'll use this example. She was at a workshop we were doing. And I said, look, if you considered a motor vehicle collision with a fatality on your foot, what's it called, your Kingsway or whatever it is, Anthony Henday. So if there was a motor vehicle collision with a fatality, I would suggest that one event for the family members of the fatality and for the family members and persons that are critically injured, you could likely argue that they're experiencing a crisis. For everybody that's stuck in traffic behind that event, maybe I'm late for a meeting, I'm having an issue, so that event is causing me to have an issue, right? Some are disannoyed. For everybody going the opposite direction and looking at that thing, it's entertainment in some ways. For me as a paramedic, I'm like, hey, this is what I'm trained for. Let's go, right? Like, let me in there. So you can take one event and based on your values, your line of sight, your perception, your connection, you'll experience it completely different. If you look at COVID, COVID has been so divisional based on people's own belief systems, values, etc. Right? I think we were talking earlier. Ask the CEO of Zoom, how did COVID impact you? Put the CEO of Zoom next to a small business owner that lost everything after 18 years of blood, sweat, and tears. Right? So you can take one event and how you experience it, your connection to it, your line of sight to it, will result in you experiencing that differently than anybody else. I don't know if that answered your question, but there's. Yeah, thanks. That's what I do. I'm a PR guy. Yeah, so you can look at things a lot of different ways. At the end of the day, though, the core principles is understanding that if we try to lead with empathy, try to demonstrate that we're trustworthy, if we try to reach our audiences in new and creative ways to make sure that they have the information to do what they want and need to do. One of the core principles of risk communication is looking for a behavioral response from the audience. So we want to make sure that we're giving them enough information for people to make informed decisions. And then they will process that information through their own filters and decision.
So for the three messages, does that vary? For the three messages, would that vary with you? Like, would you change the message slightly with, like you'd say, like, when does that message change?
Yeah, so we would approach things so number one, so one of my core principles is try to know and understand your audience. So who are you speaking to? And we know that if we're speaking generally to a broad, like a media press conference, that's just on the news or on Facebook or on TikTok or whatever it is, we want to aim for that average grade level 4. Right? If you're, some say 4, some say 6. If we're speaking to a group of PhDs, then we want to try to bring our language down to a master's level, right? If we're speaking masters, we want to try to bring that down to a bachelor's. This technical information can get very twisted, difficult. Cultural biases, cultural experiences, different demographics, age groups, all needs to change. So when you're building out that message map, we would look very generally at general audiences. And then if you're doing a town hall or you're doing a presentation with a shareholder group or whatever it is, you're going to tailor your messaging for each of those different groups.
Thank you.
Cool. They're fantastic socks.
So I have a question here. I guess the question is, what percentage of people in your population actually want to hear an empathy message right off the start? Because when I hear an empathy message, to me, they're talking down to me, and everything they say afterwards, I just walk out. I don't believe any of it.
Sorry, what's the word you're using there?
The empathy message.
Empathy, yeah.
And I'm wondering what percentage of the population actually believes in it, because I'm not one of them. We see a lot of this, we see a few years, months ago, when Trudeau said that, I stand with the people of Alberta. And the vast majority of people know he doesn't stand with us. And we see the UCP election where one of the 9 candidates said, no, I'm gonna stand up and fight. Everything you're hearing is wrong. The empathy message, she won. So there's obviously a large percent of the population doesn't believe in a person leading off with an empathy message.
Yeah, so there's a couple things on that. Number one, again, we're talking generalities as it relates to high stress, high concern situations. We're also speaking generalities about if we want to be as effective as we can. You'll hear me use the language typically we want to. And there's the caveat in there, so long as it's authentic, real, and not scripted. And when you track somebody like the Prime Minister, consistency is also one of those trust determination factors. So if you've been tracking that person, right, and your experience, your filters are that is not consistent, then you're not going to have that trust, right? So trust is there. So you'll see the language typically we want to try to lead with empathy. Typically, people will trust us more for leading with empathy than not in high stress, high concern situations. But that comes with all of those other trust determination factors. Do they know what they're talking about? Are they being consistent? Do they align with my values? I'm not going to speak. I don't care how you vote, so long as you vote. Do you have that trust? And somebody like Mr. Trudeau, right? You've been tracking that for a long time, and I'm paraphrasing. I don't trust him. And probably nothing that will say will fix that. So it's generalities, and again, it will typically, when people are feeling stressed or concerned, typically we'll have a better chance of landing a message to them if we can do it. Typically. But I appreciate the challenge.
No further questions?